Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Project-Based Learning as a Vehicle for High-Impact Practices, Reinventing Programs. This is the second webinar in a series hosted by Worcester Polytechnic Institute and its Center for Project-Based Learning, or CPBL, in conjunction with the Chronicle of Higher Education. In the first webinar in the series, held last November, we discussed how project-based learning, or PBL, as you'll hear it referred to often today, is an effective way to integrate high-impact practices into the classroom by changing the pedagogy faculty use in their individual courses. Today's webinar will focus on programmatic change, how PBL can be used to enhance programs in majors, in general education, in the first year, and more. Through the CPBL, Wooster has collaborated with many institutions on their efforts to use project-based learning to make their programs more distinctive and effective. Today you will hear from two such institutions and their champions for project-based learning. Juan Lucena is the Director of Humanitarian Engineering Education and Outreach at the Colorado School of Mines. Also a Professor of Engineering Design and Society, Juan has worked to integrate social justice dimensions into engineering courses at the university, using PBL practices to engage the students in the lives of marginalized communities, such as those involved in artisan gold mining in South America, for example. We'll also be joined by Patrick Hayden Roy, Associate Provost for Integrative and Experiential Learning at Nebraska Wesleyan University. Also a Professor of History, Patrick is leading a 4-year initiative to build project-based learning into each student's education by using the first-year seminar and other core requirements. He works with a team of faculty on integrating project-based learning into the humanities and social science courses, and is also using PBL to expand Nebraska Wesleyan's relationships with other community institutions. We'll also be hearing from Rick Vaz, the co-director of the Center for Project-Based Learning at Wooster Polytechnic Institute, or WPI. Rick's also a professor of interdisciplinary and global studies. Widely recognized as an expert in the development and implementation of project-based learning courses and curricula, Vaz has directed the center since its launch in 2016, growing the center's list of higher education clients who seek to expand their use of PBL as a high-impact pedagogical practice. And I'm Michael Amft. I'll be serving as the moderator for the webinar today. I'm a journalist who works as a contributing editor at the Chronicle of Higher Education. Just a few things to keep in mind before we begin our presentation. At any time during the live presentation, you may ask a question by typing into the box on your console. We'll try to answer as many questions as possible toward the end of the webinar. Also, feel free to download a copy of the event slides by clicking the Resources tab in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. This event is being recorded, and the archive will be available within a short period of time once the webinar is done. So, okay, let's get going. Rick Vaz, let's start with you. Welcome. Today we're going to be discussing how colleges and universities can use PBL to enhance programs. I know that Wooster has used PBL at the program level for a long time. Can you briefly tell us how PBL fits into the curriculum there?
Sure, Mike. In 1970, WPI replaced a traditional curriculum consisting mostly of required courses with a highly flexible program called the WPI Plan. Under the plan, graduation requires successful completion of 3 project experiences, 1 in the humanities and arts, 1 interdisciplinary project, and 1 project in the major. While a few details have changed since 1970, those 3 requirements are still intact. This year we celebrate 50 years of the WPI Plan, and in that time we further expanded the role of PBL in our curriculum. In the first year, students have the option to participate in a 6-credit Great Problem Seminar. Each seminar is organized around a significant global challenge, such as energy, environment, sustainable food systems, or public health, and each is co-taught by faculty from different fields. Students investigate those problems through a variety of different disciplinary lenses and then work in small teams to examine a particular instance of the problem, for example, food deserts in the city of Worcester, and then propose solutions. All WPI students complete an 18-credit sequence focusing on a particular area of the humanities and arts. The sequence culminates in a 3-credit seminar or practicum where students tie together their previous studies with some original work, which could be a research project or creative work. For example, students interested in music might compose and perform an original piece of music. In the 3rd year, all students complete a 9-credit interdisciplinary project. We call this the interactive qualifying project, and it's not related to the students' majors. Students work in small teams to address problems posed by external organizations, usually NGOs, government agencies, or nonprofits. There's no classroom component. Students work with faculty advisors, typically in a full-time immersion at one of more than 50 project centers around the globe. Then in the 4th year, students complete another 9-credit project, this time in their major. It's called the Major Qualifying Project, and it might involve research in a faculty laboratory or maybe designing some device for a corporate sponsor. Like the 3rd year project, there's no classroom component. Students work under the direction of a faculty advisor. Beyond that, projects also occur in many of the courses students take across their degree programs, not because we require it, but because our faculty believe PBL is a powerful approach to learning, and our students come to expect and enjoy project work.
Thanks, Rick. Your center has worked with faculty from a lot of different institutions. Are there particular types of institutions that are most interested in employing PBL?
Well, when we launched the Center for PBL, Mike, we believed there would be sufficient interest in the higher education community, but we weren't sure where that interest would be focused. If anything, we expected a lot of the interest would come from STEM-focused universities like ourselves. Interestingly, though, that hasn't been the case. We've worked with over 140 colleges and universities to date, and no more than 10 or 15% of them are STEM-focused. We've seen plenty of interest from liberal arts colleges, comprehensive universities, community colleges. I'd say it's quite representative of U.S. higher education.
Are you seeing areas of commonality in how those different types of institutions are thinking about PBL, particularly at the program level?
Many, if not most, of the institutions looking to use PBL as a programmatic strategy are thinking about ways to make general education more distinctive and effective on their campuses. That, of course, implies participation from a wide range of disciplines. And increasingly, we're seeing approaches to general education that are interdisciplinary. In my mind, PBL is a very effective strategy to promote interdisciplinary learning, since authentic real-world problems are inherently messy and require multiple perspectives. PBL can also be an effective approach to community engagement, which is increasingly a goal for institutions of all types. Another area of commonality we see is in capstone experiences. Many institutions are looking to either implement or enhance their capstones, whether in general education or in the majors. PBL can be a very effective strategy for giving students integrative experiences to tie together their previous learning, both in the major and across the whole program.
You mentioned the wide range of disciplines involved in general education. Are there differences between how certain disciplines see PBL? I can imagine there are some disciplines that are more of a natural fit than others.
Yeah, we certainly see institutions looking to make PBL a signature element of particular disciplinary programs such as majors or minors. And yes, there are some distinct differences in how readily different disciplines lend themselves to PBL. PBL often involves application of knowledge, so elements of PBL are more common in highly applied fields such as engineering, business, computer science, and the health professions. But you can also find good examples of PBL in fields such as philosophy, history, or mathematics.
What are some of the challenges you see, Rick, and do those differ by institutional type?
Well, programmatic change is tricky, since any established program will have defenders of the status quo, and change can be intimidating. Adopting new teaching strategies requires an investment of time, and faculty workload is always a discipline, whether at a research university, a community college, or any other type of institution. Adoption of a high-impact practice like PBL will result in faculty taking on different roles than they're used to playing, which can cause discomfort. And of course, students are asked to change too. to take on new, more active roles in their learning. So there's plenty of opportunity for people to feel pulled out of their comfort zones when a new curricular strategy is being adopted.
What strategies have you seen that help institutions succeed in supporting change?
Well, program change benefits from institution-level support, of course, but it absolutely requires grassroots involvement and enthusiasm from key program faculty as well. I'll talk about those separately. Institutional support can take many forms. Giving faculty professional development opportunities, such as participation in relevant workshops and conferences, is a common approach. Most campuses have resource centers where faculty can get advice and support from colleagues with expertise in the scholarship and practice of teaching. Leaders must recognize that curricular change requires time and effort, so recognition of that in the form of summer salary or adjustments in teaching assignments is certainly a good idea. Moral support is very important as well. Institutional leaders can highlight and celebrate the work that faculty are doing via websites, campus messaging, and campus events. Faculty want to know that their work is valued by their institution. A top-down strategy to drive programmatic change is rarely enough, though. Fortunately, on most campuses, there are already faculty experimenting with high-impact practices such as project-based learning. Finding those people and getting them together to share ideas and strategies can be empowering. The more that an academic initiative can be shaped by faculty, the more likely it is to gain support. Getting the early adopters together with others who may be interested is a first step toward building a supportive community of practice.
What about faculty who are reluctant or even resistant to change?
Well, I hear that concern a lot, Mike. People will tell me, I'm excited about making PBL an element of my teaching and our program, but how do I get the skeptics to buy in? My advice is not to ask anyone to do something they're uncomfortable with. New ideas need time to be socialized and evaluated. Instead of bringing a curricular change up for an uncertain vote, I recommend pilot programs. To the extent that you can, support the faculty who are interested in innovating. Assess what they're doing, both to improve it the next time and to generate evidence of student learning and success. One of the central elements of PBL is that students are given the chance to do real work. Try to make that work public and celebrate it. If you can provide evidence that PBL benefits students, your colleagues are more likely to be interested to try it themselves.
Well, thanks so much, Rick. Let's take a look at particular campuses and how PBL has worked out for them. I'd like to welcome back Juan Lucena from the Colorado School of Mines. Hello, Juan.
Hello, I'm here.
Could you give us a brief introduction to the Colorado School of Mines and how you've applied PBL there and put it into some context for us?
Yeah, if you could please click to my slide there, please.
Yes.
Thank you.
You should be seeing it now.
So the Colorado School of Mines, founded in 1874, is a public university with about 6,300 students. 80% of that are undergraduates and 20% graduates. We specialize in engineering and applied science, so it's a very specialized university, and that brings both challenges and opportunities for PBL. We are approaching our 150th anniversary, so now we are embarking in our Mines at 150 strategic vision for the school, which is based on 6 pillars: community, accessibility. We want to continue being a leader in STEM education, user-inspired research and innovation, lifelong learning, and alumni involvement. And what is interesting is how PBL intersects with all these strategic areas. Unfortunately, we don't have the time to go over all of them in detail, but just mention that PBL, as a very effective pedagogy, connects students with each other, with faculty, with communities, with alumni, and is well poised to be a very effective pedagogy for these kinds of strategic visions in which many universities are involved right now. So I would encourage your faculty to look at PBL as a way to participate in these strategic visions and plans, so they don't always live in the hands of the upper administration. Now, specifically, I work in the Division of Engineering, Design, and Society. This is the newest academic unit at Mines. Our mission is to inspire and empower engineers and applied scientists to become impactful leaders in socio-technical problem definition and solution. Our signature expertise and experience is integration, that is the socio-technical integration via design. And Pbl is one of our defining pedagogies because of its alignment with our mission and with this integration of the socio-technical. Our faculty are trained in engineering, design, and the social science disciplines. Most of us are trained in 2 of the 3. And EDS programs include Cornerstone Design, which is part of the Common Core that all freshmen at Mines have to take, including those in the applied sciences. We have Capstone Design, which is a 2-term client-sponsored course where Pbl has found a home as well. We are home of our newest Bachelor of Science in Engineering, and one of its defining characteristics is the integrative design studio every term, from freshman to senior. Again, another great curricular space for Pbl. And last but not least is the program that I co-direct, Humanitarian Engineering. We have 2 minors, one in Engineering for Community Development and another one in Leadership for Social Responsibility. Now, and also we started a master's program in Humanitarian Engineering. And all of these programs have Pbl across. The program that I want to highlight is Humanitarian Engineering. Is the first ever program of its kind in the United States, created in 2003. We have 50-50% engineering and social science courses and faculty. We have worked in projects from the beginning, but not with an explicit Pbl pedagogy until Humanitarian Engineering participated in the Pbl Summer Institute in 2017. So we had faculty from all over our campus coming to that, and there was so much excitement that we invited the WPI team to Mines to give us a theme-focused Pbl workshop, and the specific focus was to integrate social justice into engineering through Pbl. We had 31 participants from electrical engineering, civil, mining, and so on, and we even have attendees from outside of Mines. People came from all over the country, including some that came from Colombia. And after these 2 successful Pbl workshops in 17 and 18, Mines faculty integrated Pbl in 2 organizational spaces in petroleum engineering, particularly in a course called Properties of Reservoir Fluids, which was previously taught as an entirely technical course. Now it has a social-technical integration. And in Humanitarian Engineering, we have Pbl in our intro course, Engineering for Social and Environmental Responsibility, and in 2 design courses, Projects for People and Capstone Design.
Well, thanks for all that, Juan. Can you tell us about these design courses and how Pbl is integrated into them?
Yes. So a little bit of background. We have a project on responsible mining and resilient communities. This is a $4 million 4-year grant to educate engineers to develop global socio-technical competence while working with artisanal gold mining communities. Now, I want to be clear that an external grant is not necessary to implement Pbl, but it makes it easier, as you have the resources to buy faculty time, to pay for their development so they learn Pbl, and to, in our case, dedicate full courses to the topic and the pedagogy of Pbl. In Projects for People, we have projects focused on artisanal and small-scale gold mining, like you see in the picture. Many people do not know that this practice supplies 20% of the gold in the world, and whether we like it or not, we're all complicit in this practice because we use gold in our electronics, in our dental work, jewelry, retirement funds, and so on.
What are some of the challenges you've encountered? What's that? What are some of the challenges you've encountered in the adoption of PBL in your program and courses?
PBL lives inside of a curricular context where students have been socialized for a long time to make certain assumptions that are very particular of engineering. So, for example, students are make the assumption that design is for industry, and they learn to see people as clients. So one of the main challenges is to get to have students see communities as more than just clients. The second challenge is to center technology. Most engineering education focuses on technology. And we need to focus on processes rather than deliverers. We need to decenter technologies and place humans at the center. And PBL is a great pedagogy for these. And the third challenge is the design evaluation criteria. We need to teach students to go beyond traditional engineering criteria of cost, size, budget, and consider criteria that actually benefits communities, such as local economic diversity, protection of the local ecosystem, social justice, and so on. And the fourth challenge is the lifetime of the project. We need to overcome what I call the tyranny of the semester, because most communities do not work in academic semesters. They operate in different time scales, different rhythms, and so on.
What are some of the key successes you've had with the adoption of PBL?
So the adoption of PBL has allowed to do certain things. First of all, counteract some of the assumptions that I just mentioned to a significant extent. Students through PBL learn to value communities as more and seen more than clients. They realize that communities are entities that have histories, struggles, valuable local knowledge, and respectable desires for the future. I'm right now teaching a PBL course that does exactly that. It's called Engineers Engaging Communities. We also now see projects more like buses that have a long-term destination, and this is to counteract the tyranny of the semester. So in any given semester, a new cohort of students get on the bus and start with the previous cohort left off, and they engage PBL as the continuing pedagogy that allows them to take that bus in a particular destination. And of course, PBL allows to go beyond traditional engineering criteria and we have students learn that criteria which focus on communities more than on the technologies themselves.
Well, great. Thanks a lot, Juan. Let's take a look now at how Nebraska Wesleyan University has benefited from PBL. Welcome to the show, Patrick Hayden-Roy. Could you give us a brief intro to your university?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. So Nebraska Wesleyan, we're out here right in the middle of the country in Lincoln, Nebraska. We have about 2,000 students. We're predominantly a traditional undergraduate teaching institution, but we have also adult learners and we have selected master's programs. Liberal arts grounded, but lots of students pursuing pre-health, professional degree programs, though also many in the traditional liberal arts as well. Over the last 5 years, we've implemented a substantial curricular revision that called the Archway curriculum. And it has at its center the integration of student learning and then the grounding of learning experiences in places beyond the classroom. So like a lot of institutions of our sort, we're seeking to attract students in an era where students and their parents are asking, what is the value of what you provide in relation to what it's costing us? So the Archway curriculum, it was designed around high impact practices as a way of answering those questions. So there are actually 3 features of the Archway curriculum that are quite receptive to PBL, and it's those places we're seeking to scaffold it. One in a 4-credit hour, what we call the Archway seminar, which every student takes in the first semester of studies. And then we have at the center of the Archway curriculum what's called the integrative core, which is 18 hours of interdisciplinary we call them threaded courses that are intentionally structured around big themes like identity, power, chaos, justice. And then also looking at it within a departmental capstone course that is networked into the Archway curriculum, but serves as the exit point for our disciplinary learning. So currently we're devising PBL-based courses for our Archway seminar to be piloted next fall, and then also developing disciplinary and interdisciplinary courses in the threads of the integrative core, these networked themed course selections students take from. And then we're also working on a revision of capstones in places where PBL makes good sense for students in pulling together their learning. And ultimately, we hope to have that option at least available for every student in every major. I should emphasize that right now we're in that piloting phase that Rick mentioned, where we're working with faculty who are interested in integrating this into their courses. But ultimately, we've worked out a 5-year plan. We're in the first year, in which hopefully at the end, a scaffolded system of PBL offerings would be available to students within every academic program.
Well, thanks for all that, Patrick. What motivated Nebraska Wesleyan to explore PBL?
Well, it kind of goes back to when we created the Archway curriculum, because we had in it the potential to expand upon the integrative and experiential features. You know, as you bring something on board, you're slowly scaling up and bringing students in. And so we've got one cohort graduated, and now we're looking at how to kind of exploit some of the latent capacities of the curriculum. So my position, actually the one I'm serving in, was created not simply to coordinate the delivery of the curriculum, but also to work strategically to build out these features so that we'd have kind of a continual cycle of development. So that was why when I was attending the AACU annual conference a couple of years ago, I was really looking for ideas on the ways other schools were engaging students experientially, and that's when I encountered the Wooster Model at a workshop that Rick presented on PBL. And I immediately saw the relevance of it, I thought, for our campus and the needs of our curriculum. So we were able to bring Rick and the Wooster workshop to campus for a 2-day workshop. And there was a great deal of interest among the faculty. About 30 or so faculty, and they were across really all of our divisions, came. And it was the faculty themselves who saw how this would connect with curriculum they were engaged in delivering. So much of the momentum for bringing PBL, as was encouraged by Rick, it was brought to us by the areas across the curriculum who participated in the workshop. And then after that, we participated in the Institute for Project-Based Learning Institute at WPI, and that's where we developed a more comprehensive 4-year plan around these sort of places in the curriculum, the Archway curriculum.
And how has PBL been incorporated into the Nebraska Wesleyan curriculum?
So we're working right now, and as I mentioned, we're sort of at the beginning of the process, but we're working on those 3 areas of focus. The one that's probably most tangible right now in terms of my duties is the first-year seminar, which all students take typically in the fall. And so we've had that focused around a research paper that was really the integrating structure for developing student skills that will lead them to success later in their college studies. And so now we're working on a pilot for next fall with about 10 of the 30 sections using the PBL format. And so we have already a number of instances where we've developed productive relationships with community institutions. And it's there that we're looking to generate projects for these entering students. We also want to, in developing the pilots, enable topics that use themes that are outside those typically considered receptive to PBL. So topics that come from the arts and humanities, for instance. And that's important for us because many of those who are most invested in the Archway seminar, and instructing that come out of those disciplines. So our pilots are going to exemplify how almost any theme, including literary or historical, philosophical, could generate student projects. Now, besides the first year seminar, we also have our threads, this integrative core. We have 11 different themes for those. And we've already done some experimentation across a number of the threads, working with PBL. And so we want to work towards scaling that further. So for instance, within our democracy thread, we started a few years ago teaching a course called What If, Why Not?, in which students would devise projects focused on civic engagement, typically on campus, with issues such as abating the use of disposable plastics in the dining halls. And that's become something of a model now for creating other, sometimes they're called knotting courses, PBL courses, where projects allow students to apply learning from their coursework and using projects as an integrating tool, pulling together the different courses they've taken within the larger theme. With capstones, we already have one that is developed called Integrative Data Science, where the capstone is a PBL-based course. But some of our STEM majors are also looking at developing PBL as the capstone for their area.
Are there any other specific examples? I heard tale of maybe a planned PBL archway section that dealt with fairy tales. Are there any other examples of this that you could share?
Yeah. So one of the faculty members who is part of our pilot in the introductory seminar students take comes from theater, and he's developing a theme that focuses on fairy tales. And his theme intends to take students first through kind of an exploration of fairy tales and sort of the dimensions of this that might lend themselves to being translated into performance. So theater being, engaged with thinking about how you take things and deliver them to an audience. And so he's looking at the possibility of taking that into a local middle school with whom we partner to have students develop performance that then can connect with students at that level. And we're still working out exactly how that would interface with some aspect of students learning about, say, things like literature or other ways in which it could enhance sort of topics that they're studied in their courses at the time. So that's one kind of experiment that we're working forward on. Another thing that kind of exemplifies how we're integrating this, one of our threads is called the Power Thread. And in the Power Thread, one of the courses is Principles of Management, a traditional kind of biz-ad course, but taken by students in a number of other disciplines as well as required course. The faculty member in that course went from a textbook kind of driven exploration of management to developing a PBL based course in which students go to some partnering institutions. Some of them are businesses, some of them are nonprofit type entities, and develop for them some institutional profiles of their management cultures and practices, and then those are delivered to the institution at the end of the semester. And in doing that, interweaves the learning and observations they're doing in that institution with the textbook material that would traditionally be kind of the driver. And her initial experiment with that last semester proved to be highly successful, both from her perspective and also from student experiences. We've had another faculty member who integrated PBL into a philosophy of education course. The course itself in the past had used John Dewey as one of the subjects that they studied. And of course, these kinds of engaged learning come really out of a lot of the theories that Dewey had on education. So the students in that course studied the way on campus, Nebraska Wesleyan worked with options within the integrative core, within these threaded courses, to look how we might better orient students to the purposes of that whole structure of learning. We find students often find it something they're unfamiliar with when they come to us. So these students did a project around trying to actually help me understand how we could communicate better with those students. And the instructor of that course noted a lot of improved engagement with the students and their comprehension of course materials as they were working on projects. So these kinds of successes are being kind of the driver now for others who are looking into the relevance of PBL in their own courses. So we're hoping that this kind of priming the pump process will really help move things forward down over the next few semesters.
Overall, what have been the main challenges implementing PBL into the curriculum at Nebraska Wesleyan?
Well, so right now my concern is this first year seminar. And so we have many faculty, long-term faculty, who have taught in that. We've been doing it for about 25 years. And they're concerned that in experimenting or using PBL, that maybe we'll lose something of the virtues of the current course. So we want to be very careful as we move forward with the pilot to make sure that we're doing things that preserve those strengths and that address some of the concerns that are being expressed about, for instance, losing the rigor of writing instruction that currently is a feature of that course. And so we also want to make sure that the course itself is serving the role of integrating students into higher education. And so it's really important that we don't lose that aspect of the course as we move forward. So one of the things I'm working on right now in terms of this piloting is also structuring assessment into it. And we have some interesting ideas on how to do some comparative tracking of two different cohorts, one cohort of students using PBL in this first year seminar, one who are in our more traditional or classic version of the course. And so making sure that we're testing the PBL methodology, the PBL pedagogy against other pedagogies and trying to make sure we're driven by the results and the data we collect from that process so that we get this right and make sure it's doing what we hope it will do.
What do you think has made PBL successful at NWU?
Well, I would go back to a number of things that Mike emphasized. So one, I would say we had a curricular structure that was receptive. And I would encourage, if schools are thinking about the revision of curriculum, to anticipate maybe some of the potential for new kinds of pedagogy when they think about how they create structures. So that, I think, was one benefit we had already going for us. Two, we've had a very supportive administration, not dictating that we do this, but affirming as faculty engaged, affirming the value of it, and we've really gotten a lot of buy-in, I would say, across our administrative leadership. But the faculty have been the primary drivers for this, the engagement of faculty. To give for instance, I had anticipated when thinking about pilots for our first year seminar that I would have to maybe scramble around to find 6 people who might be interested in participating. And in the end, we've ended up with 12 who more or less, I mean, I was getting questions like, well, why can't I be part of that? And so my answer was, welcome. And so that's been really encouraging. So we haven't had to work hard for finding an early adopter kind of cohort. In addition, the virtue of PBL for tying student learning together, which is a big feature of our curriculum, the integration of student learning. PBL is a perfect structure, perfect vehicle for that. So like within our integrative core, the nodding options, already it was recognized that PBL was useful and productive for that. So we kind of had a curriculum that was waiting for PBL, and sort of having discovered it, there was a lot of recognition of how relevant it was. And I would say from not only the faculty, but our new president, the admissions office, there are lots of entities on campus that see the practicality of PBL as a way to enhance and make more coherent for an outside constituency, our students and their parents, the practicality of the liberal arts. And so I think it's a good way of attracting students who are a good fit for our curriculum and really developing them in ways that give them more career opportunities, especially when sometimes the liberal arts gets perceived as a kind of dead end for learning if you really want to go out and do something with your degree.
Great. Thanks, Patrick. What are the next steps?
Well, aside from the work described about the Our Choice Seminar and the Integrator Core, we're working on options for capstones. And so, the most obvious place where this connects is STEM disciplines. And we have lots and lots of examples of that, the work of WPI especially. But we're really interested in professional degree programs taking advantage of this. But we're hoping that in humanities disciplines that sometimes are falsely, but unfortunately too often viewed as impractical training for dead-end jobs, we're hoping that we'll be able to develop that in some of our humanities offerings to kind of pilot how this might be a vehicle for translating the skills and the knowledge aptitudes of, say, philosophic inquiry, historical research, literary criticism, or foreign language learning, then into applications that will address these kinds of so-called real-world challenges. So we're working on maybe thinking about how we can develop meaningful closure points for degrees in many of those kinds of fields. My own sense is that PBL provides an opportunity for humanities disciplines to make the case, both with students and parents, about how practical as well as engaging humanistic areas of study are. So that's a goal for our long-term explorations of the possibilities of PBL.
Terrific. Thanks to you, Patrick, and to Juan as well. Let's go back to Rick Vaz now and boil down a bit of what they have said. Maybe note some takeaways and ideas for creating best practices. Juan and Patrick serve at two very different kinds of institutions and are using PBL in very different types of programs. Rick, do you see any generalizations that can be drawn from these case studies? What have we learned so far?
Well, Mike, these examples, I think, illustrate how PBL can become the organizing principle for a range of programs in ways that can make institutions more distinctive and effective. At the same time, though, they also show how those distinctive elements can be crafted in ways that are a good institutional fit. So, for example, the work that Juan and his colleagues are doing at Mines illustrates how a program at a research university can rethink itself in ways that stay true to the core values of the discipline in the university. The highly applied, community-focused work being done in humanitarian engineering there is in keeping with the Colorado School of Mines tradition of preparing students to make a difference by tackling difficult and important problems. At the same time, though, as pioneers in the relatively new field of humanitarian engineering, they're using a PBL approach to make clear statements about the values that drive humanitarian engineering work and how engineers and communities can work together to build a better future. Nebraska Wesleyan, as you can tell, is embracing PBL at scale. Patrick and his colleagues have, in just a few years, figured out how PBL could be a signature pedagogy for the university through the Archway seminars, Integrative Core, and Capstones. And these are experiences common to every student at Nebraska Wesleyan. I've been struck by how many Nebraska Wesleyan faculty from a wide range of disciplines have been energized by this vision and are engaging in the PBL efforts. That speaks, I think, to how well Pbl fits the Nebraska Wesleyan core values, which place importance on community and stewardship. So both of these institutions are using Pbl to engage their students with problems that matter to people and communities. That's something a lot of colleges and universities are looking to do.
Thanks. Are there other lessons our listeners can take from these case studies?
Well, I think the humanitarian engineering program at the Colorado School of Mines illustrates that a handful of passionate and committed faculty can drive meaningful programmatic change and even define a new academic discipline, and that's exciting. The campus-wide work being done at Nebraska Wesleyan, I think, shows the power of institutional support for faculty development to drive creativity and innovation at scale.
Great. Thanks, Rick. And thank you, Juan and Patrick, for sharing all that information and all that insight. Let's see what our audience thinks about all this, what kind of questions they might have for us. Audience members, you can type your questions into the box on your console. Some of you already have, and we'll get to as many of these questions as we can. It looks like the first one here is directed to Patrick Hayden Roy. Patrick, I heard you say, the writer asks, that you are revising capstone courses. For the Archway seminars and threaded core courses, are you revising existing courses or creating entirely new classes with Pbl? And do you envision eliminating the non-Pbl courses once the Pbls are in place?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's a kind of some of both. So for the Archway seminar, we have a structure and a set of goals that we are not changing in terms of how many credits and what the ultimate goals or outcomes for that course are. But we're creating a new delivery system within that structure. So in a sense, we're making some really fundamental changes to the content. We're going to pilot it, so we can't answer for sure whether that pilot will lead us to believe it's this that would best benefit all students, or whether we want to have some of one and some of the more traditional research paper type so that students would maybe have a choice. Or maybe we believe it's so compelling that the results of the Pbl tell us so much of the advantages compared to what we've been doing that we want to expand that to encompass all the sections. So that remains to be determined by the results of what we do. Within the integrative core, for instance, it was an existing course, the Principles of Management, that was redesigned around Pbl. So that was no change whatsoever in terms of the actual course content in a sense, but the pedagogy was revised fundamentally with the Pbl. We imagine creating new courses for students to do projects that integrate depending on the different themes. We already have a few that do that with existing project-based models. One thing we found using the work we've done with WPI is we've been doing it, but there are ways in which we do it better now, or will be doing it better in the future because of what we've learned through this process. So it's not an entirely clear picture yet, but as we do the piloting process, we will be paying really close attention to how this works and then think about what that means in terms of how we move forward in terms of what's offered to students, who's doing what kinds of courses we're offering.
Okay, great. Well, thanks. There's a question here, sort of a metrics and efficacy question about Pbl that I'll direct to the three of you. Can you share what you are using as evidence of impact of Pbl courses? Why are they working if they are working?
Well, this is Rick. I'll take. Oh, please, Juan, go ahead. Yes.
Yeah, I just want to mention a couple things. Our humanitarian engineering program is very proud to be incredibly diverse and inclusive. We have close to 80% of female representation, which is incredible for an engineering field. And PBL plays a big role in this. So we tied PBL very closely with our metrics in diversity and inclusion, and also with a segment of the population that is very dear to our hearts, which is the low-income first-generation students. So we have found out that by celebrating what these students bring to engineering, particularly their ability to solve problems in the midst of scarcity, the empathy they have for others who live in situations like the ones low-income students have grown to, those skills serve very well in PBL courses, and the students become leaders and actually our best champions. So diversity, linking PBL with diversity and inclusion metrics is very important, and I know that diversity and inclusion is very important for most universities these days.
Okay, anyone else want to chime in on evidence of impact or efficacy?
Sure. This is Rick. I think that the type of assessment that Juan is describing is absolutely essential, because the quality with which a high impact practice is implemented matters a lot. WPI is in a sort of an unusual position because we've had project-based learning in place for 50 years, and that has allowed us to do an alumni study looking at the long-term impacts of the student project work. And in a survey over 2,500 alumni responded to, they described a very wide range of professional and personal benefits that were gleaned from project-based learning, ranging from leadership and collaboration, communication, a lot of outcomes related to professional success, but also development of a stronger personal character, feelings of self-efficacy, and that they could make a difference in the world. I think given the evidence that has been generated about the effectiveness of high-impact practices by the Association of American Colleges and Universities and others, it's, I think, maybe a more interesting question than do high-impact practices work is why aren't more institutions using them?
Great. Rick, I have another question here I'm going to direct right back to you. It's about class size for PBL. Is there an optimal size, our writer asks? What's the largest PBL course that you can run, and how are TAs used differently in larger class sizes that use PBL?
So those are great questions. PBL can be done at different scales. You can have a PBL assignment that is perhaps 20% of a given course, or you can turn an entire course over to PBL. I have seen good PBL done with class sizes as large as 150. Certainly, if there are teaching assistants or undergraduate peer learning assistants available, they can be very effective. I would say that in large class sizes, it's a very important strategy to have students work in teams to make PBL manageable. Their teams present challenges, but also the benefits of students working in teams. So I think, obviously, if you have a smaller class, you can do more, but you can do quite a bit with a larger class, and we've seen examples of that at WPI and other places around the country.
Juan, Patrick, anything to add in terms of class size?
Well, go ahead, Juan.
Okay, I can add. We have the fortune in a large class like our Capstone Design, which we offer to all graduating engineers. So it's quite a large class. So what we did in that class is we created design studios inside the class, and some design studios are theme focused. So for example, I direct the ones related to engineering for community development, and we bring into those design studio spaces students who are passionate specifically about community development, and we provide them with focus advising and mentoring from faculty who are experts in that field. So basically, to answer that question, is we took a large class and we divided into design studios, and some of those design studios have PBL, and to a larger extent, and some less. So that's how we dealt with the challenge of scale.
I would just mention at Wesleyan, with the entry seminar, we have traditionally tried to hold the enrollment there about 16, 17 students, and we think that's probably a good size for the PBL, partly because these students are coming to us without much experience doing this sort of work, or maybe only a few have experience. So we think the smaller numbers are necessary in order to bring students along in terms of the learning process involved with PBL. We anticipate maybe at the upper levels that would lend itself to a little bit larger numbers in the classes. The management class had about 28 students, and if you figure each project group might have 4 in it, that's 7, and the instructor found that managing 7 and trying to maintain the quality of what was being delivered to the partner institution, that was probably about an upper end of what she'd want to do with that structure for her course.
Okay, Juan, this is for you from a writer wants to thank you for discussing assumptions, students, faculty, and communities. The problems being served by She's asking, how does PBL overcome the faculty's assumptions on PBL? Should all PBL begin with all involved doing exercises regarding their assumptions regarding communities, students, etc.?
That's a great question. And yes, one of the beauty of PBLs is that it challenges both faculty and students to question their assumptions. So faculty, in the terms of faculty, we have to question our assumptions that we are the experts on everything. And PBL, because of the uncertainty of the problems and how the students begin to solve the problems and engage communities, sometimes they take us into very unexpected places where we don't have the answers. So the best thing that we can do as faculty is be very upfront with the students and let them know that PBL is going to challenge our notions of expertise and who is the expert. And sometimes, to their surprise, they realize that the communities, people who do not have formal education or PhDs or masters, actually happen to be the experts in a particular area. So that I would say is the main assumption that faculty have to challenge. In addition to the ones that I mentioned that are deeply ingrained in the engineering curriculum, for example, that design courses are always for industrial clients, that there has to be a specific timeline, when in fact community development works on very different timelines and rhythms. That's what I have to say.
Okay, thanks. Patrick, I think we've got time for one more quick question here. This one's about the challenges you face. Do you have accreditation or competencies measures to map with the PBL activities at Nebraska Wesleyan?
Yes. In fact, that's to a certain extent the driver for developing this within our curriculum. We have 6 institutional learning outcomes, one of which is collaboration, and one of my concerns was we weren't doing really very well when we looked at what we were doing with collaboration in the curriculum. And and as a result of some assessment around that, we decided there's ways in which we need to figure out how to do this better. And that's part of why we're bringing PBL into the curriculum, is in order to address that particular outcome. And there are a couple of other things that it connects to really nicely, but that particularly was one of the drivers. So we'll be assessing around that very carefully in order to demonstrate whether it's achieving what we hope it will achieve.
Great. Well, thanks, everyone. Well, with that question, our webinar will come to an end. Any questions that we did not have time to address will be reviewed by our presenters and responded to soon. I'd like to thank our participants and to you, our audience, for your attention and your thoughtful questions. Don't forget to register for the third and final webinar in this series, Project-Based Learning as a Vehicle for High-Impact Practices, Reinventing Institutions, at the URL chronicle.com/PBL Webinar 3, as shown on the screen here, and for the recorded version of this webinar, which will be up online within a few weeks. If you'd like more information on PBL or how to apply for the 2020 Institute on Project-Based Learning, visit the center's website, wpi.edu/plus project-based learning, all in one word. Have a nice day.